Welcome back, guys, to Chess Part 2. My first video, I kind of taught you guys how the pieces move, how the game is kind of played, the background of it. Now I'm going to get a little more into positions and what you should do when you play chess. So, let's start with the opening, the most common opening is e4, pawn to e4. And usually a common response to that would be pawn to e5. And let's say I move my knight. It's usually really good to move your knight in the middle because it covers. Well, I mean, it does cover that square, but it covers so many squares and it protects so many things. So it's beneficial to move your knight in the middle. So there's a purpose to every single move in chess. For example, like me moving my knight right there, not only controls these two squares, but it also protects my pawn right here. So if my opponent was to move their knight right there, my knight's protecting this pawn. So automatically it's protected. Now, depending on what type of player you become, some players are very aggressive and they attack. Some players are defensive and they wait and see what's going to happen. But you develop your own style of play, as you learn and as the game goes on. But it's smart to protect your pieces and kind of foresee the future, so to speak, because you have to calculate moves ahead of your opponent in order to win and gain material. Usually when you gain material or your opponent's pieces, you tend to win the game because your opponent cannot defend his king, which is the ultimate goal of the game. But yeah, so like common types of moves are I'll move white will move their pawn to d3, protecting this again. Moving the opponent will might move their pawn. It's basically you want to just move your pawns and get your bishops and your knights out first because you want to open squares eventually. For your queen to move, and finally when you want to develop your pieces, because it's very important to develop your pieces. Once you do that, you can kind of do what you want to do depending on what your opponent does as well. Now, one of the best moves to protect your king. Now you don't have to do this, but I personally I really enjoy doing this because it's a really good tactic. If there's space between your king and your rook, you can do this thing called a castle. And what a castle does is it moves your king and your rook. It flips them. Now this is a king side castle. You could also do it on the other side if there was if your queen wasn't, let's say your queen, whatever, for whatever reason was up there. And you can only castle if your king has not moved. That's the only way you can castle. If your king has already moved, you can't castle. But anyways, back to the queenside castle. It's called a queenside castle because it's the queen starts right here. It's on the queen side. It's kingside castle, but the king starts over here. Okay? But so with a queenside castle, you only move two squares. You only move your king two squares, and you move your rook right next to it. So that's would be a queenside castle right there. And it's really important to do this because it protects your king, and it develops. Usually, when your rook is right here. Usually, if you have a pawn right here or anything, you want to move it up because your rook is in the middle of the board and it protects something. And usually, like strategically, if black had their king and they castled over there, it's smart for white to move their pieces on the king side where the king is staying so they can attack the king, because honestly all these other pieces, as you may think, are important and whatnot, they really aren't, because you want to continue what we like to call the initiative, and the initiative is just the king. That's all that really matters. So Garry Kasparov, the world's greatest chess player of all time, he likes to continue the initiative. If he has to sacrifice a knight or a bishop for ultimately achieving his goal of checkmating the king, he'll do that. I mean, the material doesn't matter. The initiative is really what matters. So that's a couple of tactics and couple of positions. You're not going to get better overnight. You definitely want to practice, and you definitely want to play a lot. But as I was playing, like I learned a lot of moves. For example, like